On the morning of September 11th, Val McClatchy was at her home in Stoystown, Pennsylvania, when suddenly she heard a noise.
I had heard a very sudden surge of an engine. That's when I ran to the door, grabbed the camera, because you could see the smoke coming up over the hill.
The FBI says her photograph is the most immediate image they have of the tragic end of United Flight 93.
I cannot believe it.
Earlier today, an F-16 fighter aircraft from the 113th Wing of the D.C. Air National Guard was actually called upon to intercept a second aircraft that was perceived to be yet another threat to the Pentagon. They aren't giving any details as to exactly how they deterred that plane. Perhaps they'll be able to share that with us as the days go by and it's not such a sensitive situation. But in any case, it is possible that there was a second aircraft that was headed toward the Pentagon, and because of the D.C. Air National Guard, that situation was taken care of.
Higher in the skies, the D.C. Air National Guard flew F-16s for air defense. One of those F-16s was requested by the White House and helped deter a second suspicious plane that appeared to be headed for the Pentagon.
There was a second airplane that was approaching the Pentagon, and they went up to discourage anything happening there.
I'm standing there watching on TV, and the lights flickered in the building. About that time, we heard the engines roar, and we took off out of the building. As we were coming out from the office out through the building, the ground shook, and we heard, a big boom. Looked over and saw the big ball of fire up in the air. Like I said, probably within 45 seconds or a minute of impact, we were there. We were there before any firemen, any paramedics, or anybody. We were on site. When we got there, there was a plane flying up above, and he was smart. He flew straight for the sun, so you couldn't look at it and see exactly what type of plane or if it was a fighter or what it was. But we caught a glimpse of it, and as he was swinging, he was basically traveling in the same direction as the plane. It was in Atlanta, and that was this past winter. Was in Yamaha training. And I was sitting there talking. Everybody, of course, asked where you're from, introduce yourself to everybody in the classroom. And of course, now we just say Shanksville, where a plane crashed, and everybody knows where we're at. So I was sitting there talking to another guy, and I was telling about, he said, did you see the plane crash and whatever, was you there or anything? And I told him the whole story. And I was explaining to him about whenever we were standing in the office and the lights flickered and everything. And there was another gentleman sitting in the row in front of me that was retired from the Air Force. And as soon as he heard me say that, he immediately stopped me and he said, tell me this. And I told him, and he says, well, I'm retired from the Air Force. He said, that plane was shot down. And I said, why? And he said, because whenever the lights flickered, they zapped the radar frequency on everything before they shoot. And he said, that's why your lights flickered. Your lights didn't flicker from the impact. your lights flickered because they zapped the radar system before they shot it.
Have a sense, if we imagine the kind of world we would face if the people who bombed the Westfall in Mosul, or the people who did the bombing in Spain, or the people who attacked the United States in New York, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania, shot down the plane over Pennsylvania.
Yeah, we want to take our viewers live to Shanksville, Pennsylvania. Our Brian Cabell is standing by. This, of course, is the site where United Airlines Flight 93 crashed on its way from Newark to San Francisco, crashed on Tuesday. And I understand in this investigation there's some breaking news. Brian, what can you tell us?
Well, Darren, in the last hour or so, the FBI and the state police here have confirmed that they have cordoned off a second area about 6 to 8 miles away from the crater here where this plane went down. This is apparently another debris site, which raises a number of questions. Why would debris from the plane, and they identified it specifically as being from this plane, why would debris be located 6 miles away? Could it have blown that far away? Seems highly unlikely. Almost all the debris found at this site is within 100 yards, 200 yards away, so it raises some questions. We don't want to over-speculate, of course, but what we do know is that there is a site about a half mile behind me where the plane went down, where most of the debris is, and then about 6 miles away up by a lake, there is another area that's been cordoned off, and state police and the FBI have said definitely there is debris from the plane located there. We have a crew on the way right now. We should have pictures of that a little bit later on. In the meantime, the search here goes on. 80 searchers going foot by foot, combing the area, looking for evidence. They have not yet found the black box. Darren?
Which was my first question, so I'll move on to my next one, Brian. We don't want to speculate about this large debris field, but it seems to me from covering a number of plane crashes on the scene that, if nothing else, you can say this is not typical for a plane crash to be spread across an area this large.
It certainly doesn't make sense because most of the debris has been found in a very compact area within 100 yards, 200 yards, maybe a little beyond that. And then all of a sudden they're telling us 6 miles away they have another concentration of debris. They say it's very small pieces. Most of these are very small pieces. Most of the pieces here are no bigger than the size of a briefcase, they say.
In my mind, you know, the possibility that Flight 93 was shot down, you know, is an incredible story. But on the other hand, I think in the minds of a lot of media people, TV producers, etc., this story that emerged instead of heroism by the passengers is a remarkable story. You know, you know, certainly it's been the basis for 2 best-selling books so far. It's you know, was featured on Dateline, NBC, and some of these other news magazine shows several times over. You know, I'm sure, and you know, I hate to be so crass in referring to September 11th, but I'm sure the ratings for those shows, you know, were, you know, I'm sure those were some of the most watched news magazine shows of the year. And so then I think as journalists, you know, unfortunately it's kind of sad, but I think there's an instinct of, we have a great story here. Why would we want to like muck around and mess it up by coming up with a different story when people love this story?
This is the role the government plays in times of stress, how they view the public. Can the public stand the truth? Or shouldn't we, we need a legend at this point. We need a really neat story of reacting against such a dastardly act as was happening. So it's really nice and convenient to think of the Beamer story, let's roll. And that becomes just like the Alamo. And it's just one of those legends. And I'm not saying that somebody's issued an order somewhere that says don't do any more with 93, it's right where it ought to be, and leave it alone. I don't think that's true, but I think there'll be a lot of pressure to let the legend stay where it is. I would think there's some inclination that way.
Of murder weapon number 4, the last to come down, we know as much as we do about murder weapons 1, 2, and 3. Nothing. Yet the scenario for an Academy Award-winning film was pieced together using a transcript from the alleged cockpit voice recorder from UA-93 and from air-to-ground cell phone calls which many experts do not think could have been connected, a position with which the FBI is now largely in agreement. The official story is that this plane crashed in a field in Pennsylvania, but there was very little to see of it, and the debris was widely spread out, which seems to tally with eyewitness and other reports that murder weapon number 4 was shot down by Major Rick Gibney, piloting a U.S. National Air Guard F-16. but these stories soon disappeared from the mainstream media.
Everybody remembers Jessica Lynch, the 19-year-old private captured in an ambush and rescued by American Special Forces. The story started like this.
With that, I'll take your questions. Tom.
Brooks, we noticed that you made no mention of the rescue of Jessica Lynch and the special operations that went on. We understand that there is video taken by a combat camera team. Can you show us that video?
We did have the opportunity to have a combat camera crew with the assault force, and we'll show you only the portion that has a PFC Lynch being retrieved. Do we have the tape?
Incredibly, the cassette was already cued in the VCR.
It was in the Saddam Hospital in Nasiriyah.
And the commentary was prepared.
We were successful in that operation last night and did retrieve PFC Jessica Lynch, bringing her away from that location of danger.
This single video clip, produced and directed by the Army, is the only document of Private Lynch's rescue, the basis of a story that developed over 7 months.
Sources say
ABC the same day.
Extraction, which means Army Rangers would secure the perimeter of the hospital
TV runs with the story with a dramatic 3D animation based on unnamed sources.
To the waiting Black Hawk helicopter.
It was an Iraqi
CBS the same day.
Paramilitary post that had been Lynch's uncomfortable home for 10 long days.
We've just arrived here at Saddam Hospital.
It was here she lay suffering from 2 broken legs, a broken arm, and multiple gunshot wounds, being treated not by a doctor, but by an Iraqi pharmacist.
Now it's serious wounds and incompetent doctors. CBS doesn't name their sources either.
The Pentagon says she is the first American prisoner of war to be rescued from hostile territory since World War II.
The headline in the Washington Post, she was fighting to the death. In it, Private First Class Lynch is portrayed as a kind of Rambo. The source, U.S. officials.
April 12th. Jessica Lynch is a certified hero and a media celebrity. 600 articles have been written about her. Television networks compete for an interview. MTV offers her a show. Her agent negotiates a $1 million book deal, and NBC prepares a television movie, Saving Private Lynch.
It's very important to us as Americans to bring back our fellow soldiers. But most importantly is to bring back somebody like Private First Class Lynch, who was risking her life on the battlefield.
1 month later, journalists arrive at Saddam Hospital without a military escort. Their investigation turns the story on its head.
Private Lynch hadn't been shot in a firefight, as earlier reports suggested.
ABC, May 7th.
To have broken her leg when her truck overturned. An orthopedic surgeon who was due to set Private Lynch's broken leg the following morning says U.S. soldiers put a gun to his head as they burst into the operating room.
We started shouting, "We are doctors, don't shoot."
The hospital staff says there were no Iraqi troops on the premises when the Americans rushed in. They had all left the morning before the rescue. The soldiers broke down doors in the intensive care unit when they could have just asked where she was. Private Lynch has yet to give her own account of her captivity here or her rescue. She remains in seclusion at the Army's Walter Reed Hospital, reportedly suffering from amnesia.
And also,
June 17th, the Washington Post revises its original story. Does it make any difference? No. The myth of Jessica is stronger than the facts.
Thank you for being here.
July 21st, Private Lynch is decorated for bravery.
She is just 20 years old. But Jessica Lynch comes home with the experience of a long, painful journey.
I would like to say thank you to everyone who hoped and prayed for my safe return.
Whether or not she will be able to remember that time period.
1 month later, she retires from the Army and takes up a media career. November 9, NBC airs the telefilm Saving Jessica Lynch. In light of its serious nature, there are no commercial breaks. Variety calls it Mission Impossible but Real. November 11th, Veterans Day.
It is clear that Ms. Lynch has been taken into many American hearts. She's done her first television
Her book
interview
is
with
published. ABC wins the scoop of Jessica's first interview.
So just to get this clear.
Yeah.
Did you fire your weapon back and did you kill any Iraqis?
No. No. My weapon did jam and I did not shoot. Not a...
Even Jessica admits her story was false.
Nothing.
But the lies and manipulations didn't matter. It was too late. The Pentagon had written a perfect television script, and that's what remains in memory.
Our hearing today has been about two cases, the Tillman case and the Lynch case. And in both cases, it seems like we have, we say deceptive, misleading information. It wasn't misleading information. We have false information that was put out to the American people, stories that were fabricated and made up. In the case of Specialist O'Neill, his statement was doctored. It was actually rewritten by somebody. These aren't things that are done by mistake. There had to be a conscious intent to put a story out and keep with that story and eliminate evidence to the contrary and distort the record. In the case of Jessica Lynch, we have the Washington Post story saying that they were told by government officials. So it was attributed in the Post to government officials. And what we have is a very clear deliberate abuse, intentionally done. Why is it so hard to find out who did it? Why is it so hard to find out who's responsible and to hold them accountable?